afternoon. Aloha. Welcome, welcome, beautiful people. Are we recording? Okay, we're all set. All right, folks, welcome to our next Princeville Moʻolelo series here in this beautiful space, which is, as we know, a collaboration between the Friends Group and the Princeville at Hanalei Community Association, who offers this beautiful space and this partnership. Welcome to the folks on Zoom. We have Patty and Louise on the computer, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to bring your feedback into the room. All of you here, welcome. It's great to see friends old, new, and somewhere in between. So it's a delight to have a nice full room for what I'm sure I say this every month when I stand before you, but we are in for such a treat. This is going to be such an incredible conversation, and I'm so delighted you're here to share it with us. So a super quick intro about who we are as the Friends Group for anyone that might not be as familiar. We are indeed the nonprofit Friends Group that supports our 3 national wildlife refuges. And of course, we are just honored and delighted that our sweet little island of Kauai has 3 spaces set aside, federally protected lands for endangered and threatened seabirds and water birds. And those refuges are Hanalei, Hulaʻia, and Kīlauea Point. Those are the places that we work in partnership with their dear friends at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, represented today by our dear friend, Krista. Aloha, Krista. Wahoo. The team in brown is why we are here. Essentially, we ask, what can we do, and what do you need, and how can we help as a Friends Group? That is our foundational principle. And within that, of course, the real why we all show up in service of this incredible work is the wildlife. It's what we're here for in many different ways, many different passions, many different skills and experiences. And that's part of what we're here to chat about today. So within that edict of just showing up in any way that we can to support our Friends Group, there are a few pillar programs that we consistently support, essentially channeling the goodwill of our community into the service of the fish and wildlife through money and in-kind staffing support and community outreach like we're enjoying today. But within that, supporting the spaces that help create safety for our wildlife. Going out into the community and talking story and meeting the community off refuge and bringing that message out wherever the community might be. Of course, one of my heart space programs is partnering with our dear friends at Save Our Shearwaters and providing outreach. This time of year is fallout season, so in particular, this is their big time of the year. We'll certainly hear more about that today, but with these incredible partners helping to raise awareness within the community and bringing financial resources to cover the cost of care for every one of those birds that gets transferred from one of our refuges and into the care of Save Our Shearwaters. It's something we're really proud to be able to do. Of course, wildlife conservation depends upon the engagement of our keiki, getting them excited, aware, and involved in the work that we do. So we do that in a number of ways by supporting the Fish and Wildlife's keiki education programs, and in particular, underwriting free buses to bring young people to the refuge for those inspirational field trips that any number of you have participated in some capacity. And on the other end of the educational scale, providing scholarship awards for young people supporting their degrees in wildlife conservation. So the impact of this commitment is just immeasurable as folks go out into the world, get their education and inspiration, and then hopefully come back to Hawaii and help make this an even safer place in the future. So really honored that that's one of our pillar programs as well. Just a quick recap of how you can get more involved and help visiting us out at Kīlauea Point. Every dollar that's spent in our nature store, and we have a number of our folks here from our nature store environment. We have Margaret in the back who leads the team. Margaret, woo! We have Barbara, we have Tina. So we're just missing in our team of awesomeness, Roy, who's not here. So anyway, most of our incredible visitor education and nature store team is here with us tonight. So shop your heart out, and every dollar that we raise there goes in to help support our wildlife. In addition to that, of course, signing up to volunteer or to donate or join as a member, or just following our work. For folks online, I invite you to click over if you're not already receiving our emails to do so and sign up for our monthly newsletters. And for folks in the room here, there's a sign-up sheet in the back, and we'd be delighted to have you join us. So This is a monthly series bringing voices together, different conservationists and cultural practitioners into this room, and for us to celebrate community. And the next one is going to feature our dear friends with the Conservation Dogs of Hawaii. And we have one of those awesome team members who is back on island with us now, Marcia. Marcia and her beloved Koa are an incredible part of that team. So we're going to hear on November 19th, Tuesday, November 19th, same spot here, a conversation about what they do and, of course, how we in a friends group can help support all of their amazing work. But today, what we're here for, I need my notes. We have three incredible people here, and I could stand here and read all of this. Should I? You guys are amazing. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. We have we have a really incredible collection of speakers all to talk about our wildlife in a really beautiful way. So first up, we're going to hear from Dr. André Raine with Archipelago Research and Conservation. André has worked on seabird conservation projects on Kauai and the wider Pacific for 13 years. During that time, he has initiated multiple projects to save endangered seabirds, particularly the a'o and o'a'o, as evidence on Robby's awesome shirt here, and pioneered the use of a range of monitoring technology to locate rare seabirds in remote mountains and track seabirds to their feeding and wintering grounds. He's originally from Bermuda, another horrible place in the world, and he has a PhD from the University of East, is it Anglia? There we go, like he said, in the UK. And André has led bird research projects around the world. After that, we're going to hear from Robby, and it's my pleasure, my first time meeting this incredible gentleman, Director of Aviculture. Okay, I love it when people help me here. With Pacific Rim Conservation, another incredible partner doing work at Kīlauea Point and beyond. Robby has extensive experience in avian ecology and aviculture. Robby was the research coordinator and facility manager. If I can't laugh at myself, right? You know, and please do laugh at me as well. Research coordinator and facility manager for the San Diego Zoo's Hawaii Endangered Bird Conservation Program at the Kiaho, that thing, Bird Conservation Center from 2007 to 2009, and also worked for the state of Hawaii on Maui and Kauai forest bird recovery projects for the American Bird Conservancy on translocation of the miller bird, another miller bird, from Nihokū to Leisan for the Institute of Wildlife Studies and for the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge as a seabird monitoring crew leader on Bull Deer. Ooh, I got one, Bull Deer Island. And then, of course, we are leading to as well the ringleader, the lady who brought this conversation together, a very, very dear friend of ours, as evidenced by her beautiful shirt, my beautiful shirt. It's probably all sweaty now. Just an incredible artist and an incredibly passionate wildlife conservationist, Caren Loebel-Fried. She is indeed an award-winning author and an artist from Volcano, Hawaii. She has written and illustrated 9 storybooks to date, including A Perfect Day for an Albatross, Manu, The Boy Who Loved Birds, and Hawaiian Legends of the Guardian Spirits. They're incredible books, which we have available on the back counter here. So Margaret would be more just delighted to help sell some of those books to you and get them signed by Caren before at the end of our session here. So please take advantage of that. Caren's art for the Friends Group, as well as Midway Atoll National Wildlife Refuge and the Friends of Hanauma Bay, bring in funds for conservation. Indeed, you know, the earned income that we produce depends upon the generosity of incredible artisans as well as conservationists to help create this beautiful products that we're able to sell. And you've been such a dear friend for so many years. We're so grateful for you. And indeed, her artwork has helped generate thousands of dollars of support for the wildlife that we help protect. So, mahalo nui. Original art for Finding Home, A Hawaiian Petrel's Journey, was acquired by the Hawaii State Foundation for Culture and the Arts for their Art in Places program. That is very cool. Yes. Congratulations. And as we'll hear about, Karen's love of seabirds is fueled by her fieldwork out on Midway Atoll, among others in this room, doing the albatross census, which is just a mind-blowing experience, just really incredible. And her research of Oʻahu and other seabirds on their breeding grounds throughout the Hawaiian Islands. So enough from me, but I really wanted just to say, we're in the company of some incredible, incredible folks. And I will get off the stage so that we can hear from them. But thank you again for being here. Bless you all for being here as well, for leading us through this conversation. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. André. You're good.
All right. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me in the back there? Yeah, I'm broadcasting my voice. Yes. Right. My name is André. I'm the Science Director for Archipelago Research and Conservation. We're based in Hanapepe, and our focus is on endangered seabirds and endangered water birds. And I'm going to be part of a tag team here. So once I'm finished, I'm going to tag team Robby in, and he's going to come lunging forth and continue the story. So I'm going to set the scene first of all this evening, and then we'll go from there. So we're talking about the ua'u, the Hawaiian petrel. Here's a little bundle of fluff, a Hawaiian petrel chick. And we all know why it's called the ua'u, right? I'm going to get this over and done with right from the beginning with my patented bird calls. So it's called the ua'u because its call is ooh, ooh. So that is why. Because we're only talking about the ua'u, I'm not doing any other bird calls. Sorry. So here's a ua'u in its burrow. So these guys basically, at this point in time, now nest up in the mountains of Kauai. We're just talking about Kauai here. They would have nested in the lowlands as well back in the day, but because of the suite of issues that have faced this species ever since humans first arrived on these islands, they've been pushed into more remote parts of the island. So the real core habitat for them now is the northwest of the island, with a little population in Nihokū, which we'll talk about at some point. This is Upper Manoa Valley in the mist. I took this photo just a couple of days ago, but this is the classic habitat. So we're talking these sort of wet forests up on these ridges in really high areas, and that's where they're still persisting. And they're not doing well. So this is a paper that we published a couple years ago now, looking at the trend of both of these species, the ua'u and the a'o, which is the Newell shearwater, which is called the a'o because it goes. Had to sneak the other one in there. Has to be done. Has to be done. But I won't be talking about the a'o anymore, except to say that it's suffered a very serious decline, 94% between 1993 and 2013, and the ua'u 78% decline. If you were to chart this another 10 years to where we are now, basically it's flatlined at this extremely low level. So these precipitous declines that the species have faced in that period of time have leveled off to have these birds now at this really low level still on the island. And this paper's in Condor, if anyone's interested. So why? Well, one of the main reasons is because of introduced predators. So for anyone who works with seabirds or indeed any native species, the introduced predators are one of our #1 issues. This is a cat on a camera choking the life out of an a'o, which was going in to feed its chick in a burrow. So unfortunately, at least when we first started back in the day in all the colonies that we work on in the mountains, this was happening all the time. You couldn't go to a colony without finding dead birds everywhere. The cats are my personal public enemy #1, but any of the other introduced predators, pigs, this is a pig eating a wedge-tailed shearwater. Rats, we have the Pacific rat, the Norwegian rat, and the ship rat, and those guys all eat eggs and chicks of these birds. And then the barn owl, which the Hawaiian Department of Agriculture decided would be a good thing to introduce into the islands to control rats, does a really good job of controlling native seabirds. So this is one beheading a ua'u chick on Lehua. So predators are a serious problem on this island, one of our main issues in the colonies. Secondly is power line collisions. And these are not in order of threat. They're all really serious threats. But you can see here, as you've got your birds, picture the birds. They're out foraging at sea, out at sea, catching their flying fish and their squid, and then they're coming in under cover of darkness to feed their chicks. As they're flying in towards their colonies, like let's assume they're all up in there, they're flying along, they can't see these power lines, and so they hit the power lines and down they go. I do have a video here. Let's see if it works to illustrate this. So this is not an ua'u. This is actually an a'o hitting a power line, but this is the kind of thing that we see up in the mountains. Yeah, that's a dead bird. So you know, this has been this has been one of our major contributors for decline over time. This has been power line collisions. Oh, I won't show you that again. I know it's pretty gruesome, but we'll move on to more gruesome things. This time of year, terrible time of year for our birds because the birds get attracted by lights as they're leaving their burrows the first time. They're heading out to sea, and they get attracted to the lights of buildings, like these buildings here, and then they end up on the ground where they either get run over by cars like this ua'u here, or they sit there forlornly staring at walls until they get eaten by cats and dogs, or starve to death or dehydrate. So birds that are grounded almost invariably are not going to make it. So that's why it's really important at this time of year to keep on the lookout for these birds and obviously pass them over to the Save Our Shearwaters. I'm sure preaching to the converted here, everyone knows about the Save Our Shearwaters program, but please keep a lookout for birds at this time of year. As I'm driving back to Kīlauea tonight, I'm going to stop at some of my hot spots to look for grounded birds. Anywhere with bright lights, unshielded lights, it's going to be a problem. And also just from a grounding point of view, right now we have our moon up. It's a full moon, right? Or coming up to the full moon, so that's good. The moon counteracts the effects of our lights. But what's going to happen in a couple days' time is that the moon is going to be full, but it's going to be rising a couple of hours after dark. So we're going to have a couple of hours of darkness, which is when the birds are fledging. So it's going to be pretty bad. So once we get into that dark period, or if it's raining really heavily, even if it's a full moon, that's when we should be really looking out for birds. So all of October into mid-November, when our ua'u are fledging, is the time to be looking out for grounded birds. And some other threats to think about. Their threats are manifold, unfortunately, but introduced plants like ginger always kind of irritates me when I hear tourists talking about how beautiful the mountains are with these beautiful flowers all over the place. And like, you're talking about ginger, aren't you? So ginger changes the floor, the forest floor, which is where the birds are nesting in holes in the ground, and then the birds can't nest. So our invasive plants like ginger, guava, these kind of things. And then here's an ua'u flying out at sea. All the threats that face seabirds at sea, these can be anything from overfishing, bycatch, plastics, climate change. There's a raft of things that hit these birds out at sea as well. So, you know, no wonder that they're doing badly. So luckily there are solutions. I'm only going to talk about solutions related to the colonies tonight. There are many other solutions, and I'm sure you guys, particularly with the power lines, have seen all of the diverters on the lines as you're driving around. Those are proving to be really, really important for stopping birds hitting power lines. We're seeing really great results there, which is awesome. But I won't go into any of that. I'm just going to stick to our colony stuff. So there's a couple of solutions here, and one is to actually protect the birds up in the mountains where they are. So this is a place called Poakea in Hononapali Natural Area Reserve. This is a little weather port there. We have a lot of birds up in these areas, so we do predator control. Well, my organization does not. This is Halleck's Ecosystem Restoration. They do all the predator control in these areas and also National Tropical Botanical Gardens. But protecting the birds up in the mountains by controlling the predators, or bringing the birds down to areas like Nihokū in the lowlands, where it's actually easier to look after them. And I'm always jealous of Nihokū because when I'm sitting at the helipad waiting to fly into the mountains and it's just all grayed out and I'm like, not going to get in today. Instead, you could just drive in the car to Nihokū and be like, oh, there they are. So there's a reason for setting up sites like this because it's certainly easier to manage. So this is what's going on up in the colonies. There's multiple ways of dealing with predators. One way is to fence them out. So this is an ungulate fence that's at Upper Limahuli Preserve, and this keeps all of the pigs out. So the pigs cannot get through there. Unfortunately, cats and rats can. So this is not a predator-proof fence, it's an ungulate fence. But you can ungulate fence these sites to keep the pigs away, and then you trap everything else. So this is a good nature in A24. Probably a lot of you know this trap, but it's an automatic rat trap. And here's some little dead rats lying there. Each one of those could have been a seabird predator. So it's always nice to see, it's not nice to see dead animals, but it's nice to see dead rats in these mountains because, you know, any of those could have taken out an egg or a chick. And the cool thing is that predator control up in the mountains really works. So I've been here since 2010, 2011 now. So it's been my fortune to work in these mountains all these years over and over again and to be able to see how things are changing over time. So here's just a couple of figures just to illustrate this. This is reproductive success of ua'u at some of our sites. And you can see like in the first few years, hardly anything was fledging. Everything was just being eaten. And now we're sort of with the ua'u at this site, we're at 78%. So it's a huge change in the fortune of these birds simply because the predators are being controlled. These are, for all of our management sites, these are acoustic sensors. These are call rates over time. And what we do with these is we have these acoustic sensors set up all across the colonies and they're recording the call rates of the birds over time. And what we can see is this nice steady increase every single year on all of our sites. We're seeing more and more ua'u calls, more and more a'o calls, which means the colonies are getting bigger and bigger. So predator control works, but the thing with it is once you start it, you can't stop because I'm a fan of zombie movies and you know the zombies are always scrabbling at the door like this kind of thing. They keep coming and the predators are just like that. So you can't get off lay off the gas there. You're in it for the long run because they will always keep coming. Even taking their heads off the zombies, it doesn't stop them. It doesn't stop them. But it depends on the movie you watch. But anyway, I digress. We've modeled the effectiveness of predator control over time, and you can see here without predator control on our sites, we're getting this downward spiral into extirpation. With predator control, we're getting increase, which is what we want to see. So predator control in the mountains really does work, but it's a ongoing process and will be a forever project. The second thing you can do is to create these sort of oases inside the colonies. So we have a couple of these now. These are our platinum level protection at each site. So we have predator-proof fences in some of our sites now. These fences, nothing can get in. Like even the smallest mouse can't get into a fence like this. And then we set up nest boxes. These are all nest boxes here, and you can see some speakers. And what we do in these areas, because there are birds around, we know there's birds around, is we broadcast the calls. And the birds are really social. So once they hear other birds like, ooh, where's the party at? And so down they come, and then they start, we've already set up homes for them, so they don't have to dig the burrows. And then they start occupying the nest boxes. So this is platinum level protection in the mountains inside our sites, where we're starting to bring these birds in. And the good thing is they can nest in really dense concentrations of birds. They really like being amongst each other. And so you can have a lot of birds in a really small area. So this is what our management sites look like right now. That is all of them. That's a lot of them. And we go into these sites 10 times a year to monitor the birds and see how they're doing. You can see they're all, so we're like over here. These are all the mountains that we're looking at in that direction. And within these areas, so these are all the management sites, which are all being managed as part of the KUC Habitat Conservation Plan. So that's funding through KUC to offset the take of power line collisions. And that's great because that means we have funding to do predator control and monitoring at all these areas. And you can see here, these are 2 predator-proof fences that currently exist. One in Honopu, one in Poʻakea. This year we had our first egg laid in the Poʻakea predator-proof fence, which is really awesome. And we have one bird here in a nest box, which for 2 years now is just calling and calling. And I'm like, come on, sounds so earnest. Someone should come and mate with this bird. It will happen next year. And then we have 2 more predator-proof fences that are going to be going up. This one is an Upper Limahuli Preserve. It's in the process of being built. The whole site was cleared and then the birds arrived, so we don't do any fence construction during the time when the birds are there. But once they leave in end of November, fence construction will continue. And then Upper Manoa Valley, which is a private property owned by a very gracious landowner, is allowing us to do all of this protection work up in Upper Manoa. So really grateful to have that site as well. So soon we'll have 4 predator-proof fences in amongst all of these management sites. So things are looking good for the birds there. Now, like I said, the second thing you can do, as well as protect them up in the mountains, is to build something in the coast and bring the birds to that. So that's what the next part of this talk is going to be about. And then we're going to move on to Robby, who will also be talking about Nihokū too. Here's Nihokū, beautiful Kīlauea Point. And this site was chosen because it's got a nice slope, which the birds need to take off. You can't have flat land because they won't take off from it. It's looking out to sea, so it's away from all the lights in the background here. And the idea is to create this colony in the coast area, an area which is nice and easy to manage, and then just start bringing birds in, and then they'll be fledging all their little chicks, out they go, and then over time, this huge colony. That's the aim. So we're going to go back in time a little for this, because I was doing this translocation work a while ago now under a different hat. So now I have my own company, ARC, but I used to work as a project manager for Kīlauea Endangered Seabird Recovery Project. So all the work I'm going to talk to you about now was when I was working with them. But you can see this is a really big project with a whole load of different partners, including, of course, Pacific Rim with Robby here. American Bird Conservancy, the Refuge, lots of different funding sources. So it was a multi-organizational effort. And so the way we went about doing this was, okay, we want to set up a colony. We want to bring birds from the mountains to these colonies, but where are these birds going to come from? We know that the birds are in really remote areas, so the first step is to figure out, well, which of these areas should we draw from? So for multiple years, we worked in these areas here. These are all areas that are remnant colonies. There used to be lots of birds here, and unfortunately, over time, these birds have dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. So we spent years searching in these areas trying to find suitable burrows, but it quickly became apparent, well, quickly, like over years, of lots of pain. It became apparent that, there are birds hanging on in all these areas. It's pretty cool to think that there's still birds in Sleeping Giant, for example. Pretty amazing. The Kīlauea colony, but they're like shadows of what they used to be. And so they're really hard to find, these birds. It's really hard to find sufficient birds to take for translocation. And on top of that, there's no management going on in these areas. So if you're walking along and creating trails to burrows, you're having to monitor these burrows year after year to take chicks for translocation, you're basically just creating pathways for predators to go and finish off the last of the birds. So we turned our attention instead to areas where predator control had been initiated and was ongoing, which is Honolulu and Upper Limahuli. And that's what we decided to go for. So we left these colonies, the sort of, I hate to use the term, but the dying colonies aside, and we went for the colonies where there's still birds and there's management going on. So we know we can take birds from these areas where they're being protected. And so my role in the translocation and KESRP's role in the translocation was to basically find the birds and then deliver the birds to Robby. Simple plan. So what we would do, easy. So, what it involves is finding the burrows first. They don't want to be found, obviously. And they're in really steep areas and dense vegetation. So you're basically trying to find these burrows. And then once you found them, you're monitoring them each year to make sure that you have chicks that are available that can then be translocated. And many of the burrows that still exist are deep, because that's one of the ways they've survived, is to be really deep inside these, like many feet deep and underground. So not a lot of the burrows that we had were burrows that we could actually even take birds from. So it's like you find a bunch of burrows, some of them aren't active in that year, some of them have been predated, and of those, some of them you're not able to take from. So whittle the numbers down. And so we would visit these each of our colonies 10 times all the way through the year and chart the progress of these ua'u in their burrows to see which were prime candidates for translocation. And as well as monitoring the burrows, we had a bunch of tech up there as well to help us monitor. So firstly, the acoustic sensors, like I was talking about, that's letting us know how the colony itself is doing, but also these cameras. The cameras are really important. We have 30 cameras on each of our burrows in the mountains, and these are letting us know, okay, well, are predators going for the birds? What predators are they? But also they're really important for translocation purposes, because what you don't want to do is take a chick after it's emerged from its burrow, because they imprint once the theory is if they come out of their burrow, they're imprinting on their burrow, and that's where they're going to go back to. And then all of Robby's hard work would be pointless, because they're just going to fly straight back into mountains again. So we had cameras on all of our translocation burrows. We'd be checking and checking, and then the time would come where we'd be getting ready for translocation. Day of translocation. It was always really exciting, but also filled with trepidation, because are there going to be enough birds? Are the birds still going to be alive? Did a cat come in since the last time we checked and nail some of them? What's the weather going to be like? When we get up there, will birds have emerged from the burrows? We won't be able to take them. If we get them, will we be able to get out? Because it's all helicopter access only. So if the weather comes in, suddenly you're stuck with a bunch of birds in chicks in boxes and nothing, and just sort of sitting with them. So, which is not what we want. So the first thing we would do is on the day, so everything's meticulously planned between KESRP and PRC. Lots of communication to make sure we know, okay, guys, we're going in, we're going in. Robby and the team are heading up to the airport to get ready for us to deliver the birds. And we would go and we'd check the burrows first. So all of our pre-selected burrows, we'd have a look at them. And if there was any down out front, which suggests that the bird had come out, those birds were removed from the list. And likewise, if we saw this on the camera, super cute, right? Look at that little bundle. Nope. So we're not taking him because he's come out of his burrow. So any bird that's seen to be out of its burrow or even poked its little beak out of the burrow is no longer a bird for translocation purposes. So we'd have to like knock off a couple of burrows. Nope, nope, nope. And then eventually we would get to our candidates. And there they were, always super happy to be out of the burrow, as you can see. He's like, what the? You know, this one, yeah, he had a bite on him too. And then in they go into their little box, their little carrying case. And then some of these burrows were kilometers away from the translocation site where the helicopter was going to come and get us. So we're sort of carrying them down, these sort of precious birds. I just point out there's no bird in this flattened box. That's a box being carried to get a bird. That's not how you carry a bird like that. But anyway, you can see here, this one is in Hanakapiai. And this particular day, we had our birds in boxes. Eventually, we got them all. And the weather came rolling in, and we're just like, oh no. And then the helicopter comes, and it lands like on this really narrow LZ landing zone where it's like one skid on. We're like piling boxes into the helicopter. The helicopter like lifts off, lands again on my foot. Luckily, I had steel toes, so I'm like, ah. And then we get all the birds in, get in the helicopter. Helicopter takes off. I look down, and one of my staff is still there, Liz. And she was like, and the pilot's like, he's like, oh, well, she'll be all right till tomorrow, won't she? I'm like, no. So I think that was also the day where Robby's like, what did you do to these birds? Because they'd vomited everywhere because the helicopter's bouncing and so on. So yeah. Also, sometimes it was not rough. And there's Mike carrying a bird. That's actually how you carry a bird down to the LZ. And then here's the helicopter, and then away we go. And there they go, straight across to Kīlauea. And yeah, between 2015 and 2020, we translocated 110 ua'u, 85 a'o, and we handed the birds over to Robby, which is what I'm doing right now. I could probably, should we just save questions for later, or do you want to? I don't mind. If we want to do a couple of questions now, or we can just wait till later, because I kind of have set the scene for Robby here. He's braced.
Well, we can do questions, yeah, whatever.
About the deflectors on the electric lines, so those little tabs.
Yeah, so those are, you see them all on the power lines. There's it's a reflector on it. So there's two types. One is just a reflective diverter, and those, they don't emit light, but they'll reflect moonlight. And they just provide like a visual deterrent for the birds because it's better than just a straight up line. But in the mountains where the wires are not running alongside the road, we have LED diverters as well, and those flash. And so those, you can't have them by the road because people crash, which you don't want. But in the mountains where there are no cars, they provide a better deterrent because the birds can see them from further away. And the whole idea with those is just if the bird's bombing towards the power line, it has enough time to divert up and over, so it doesn't end up like that bird I showed you previously. Yep.
How large are your protected zones?
They range in size, like Upper Limahuli is 150 hectares. They're sort of like around that sort of size, 100 to 200 hectares probably. Yeah. And then the fence sites that we have in the mountains are small. They're like, you know, a couple acres. So yeah. Because the problem is in the mountains, there's not a lot of places to put a predator-proof fence. And the places where you can put them, which are the ridges, is also where the birds are nesting. So you end up like, you don't want to destroy any burrows. So you have to really chart the path really carefully. Yeah, so we check the fences every time we go up, which is once a month. And the Hallex guys who do the predator control, they check the fences once a month. So that's every 2 weeks then. And then there's KRCP, the Kīlauea Resources guys. They do vegetation control around the fences for anywhere within Hononapali Natural Air Reserve. And then Upper Limahuli, which is managed by National Tropical Botanical Gardens, that's their wheelhouse. They do all the plant control there. Yep. Yeah, it's really hard to figure it out because they're a rare nocturnal seabird nesting in these mountainous areas, but it's around 25,000 per species. So it sounds like a lot, maybe, but when you consider these birds were like in their millions in the past and would darken the night skies, they're shadows of what they used to be. And one of the places which always drives it home for me is the Kīlauea colony. So that place used to be like Upper Limahuli Preserve, which is where we're working now. It's just above Kīlauea town. And when they were studying it back in the day, they would mark the burrows with poles, white poles, and now they're like grave markers. So you walk around and there's white poles everywhere and there's no birds. So these like lowland colonies have just slowly drifted away to extirpation. Yep.
So I keep wondering why the Newell's is only listed as a threatened species. Bottle was always a little less, but Newell's at the time was dramatically consideration.
Yeah, I mean it's been up for endangered status, but just kind of got stuck on desks for years. Yeah, I mean the good news is they're both ESA species, so they're protected on the Endangered Species Act, which is an extremely important act which should never be removed. So therefore, we have funding to protect both of these species through the ESA and through things like habitat conservation plans.
You're good.
Okay. Thank you, Andre, for that great lead in. I just want to say, my name is Robby Kohley. I work for Pacific Rim Conservation. And as he said, my title is Director of Aviculture. That is a really fancy way for saying that I wash a lot of dishes and I make a lot of fish slurry. I'm proud to say at this point in time, we have translocated over 700 individual seabirds of 7 different species. Andre covered a little bit of my first talk, so I'm going to breeze through some of the slides and we'll get into the stuff that hopefully is most interesting, or at least I'm most familiar with. So Andre covered this. Birds are in trouble. I just wanted to reiterate something that Andre said. Most of the species or most of the individuals are left in the mountains. So that makes it, historically, they would have nested all the way down to sea level. So then it makes a high conservation priority is to try to reestablish some of those colonies at lower, more accessible sites. In 2012, funding became available to build a predator-proof fence. Kīlauea Point was chosen because it already has a large seabird colony. And the location chosen was Nihokū. And the reason Nihokū was chosen was the reason Andre already mentioned. It had its accessibility to the ocean and low light pollution. So in 2014, a predator exclusion fence was started. For those who are not familiar with a predator exclusion fence, it is about 6.5 feet tall, which keeps mammals from jumping over it like cats. It has a rolled hood, which keeps mammals from crawling over the top of it. And then it has a buried skirt, which keeps stuff from digging underneath it. And then it is made of stainless steel mesh that not even baby mice can get through. So Andre already covered all this. This chick is adorable, so I included him. And Andre and his crew's work was very hard, but they make it look really good sciencing. So I just went ahead and left that in there. Okay, let's get that. So on the translocation day, Andre already talked about it. They rounded up the seabirds, they brought them down, they were helicoptered to Princeville, and then they were driven to the site at Nihokū. On the day that they came in, I call it intake day. Each chick was weighed, measured their wing chords, and did a quick behavioral check, and also weighed them. Obviously, that was really important. And then they were placed in artificial burrows like you see right here. There's 73 artificial burrows. We use the artificial burrows because we can monitor the chicks and get to them daily to feed. So this little lid comes off and you can get to the chicks every day. So at that point in time, PRC essentially became surrogate parents. We cared for the chicks every day. The chicks were fed a combination of fish slurry, they were weighed, and their health monitored every day. I just put up this. This is all the chicks. We started obviously in 2015. The last year was 2012. And this is just a general table that shows the translocation age, the mean, and the range. The biggest thing to take into consideration is just how the time in care varied, with some in care only 12 days, and somewhere in care for as long as 60 days. And that just represents, put that in perspective, they fledged on average at 115 days. Whoop. Okay, so now this is a very busy, colorful graph. This is my favorite part of the whole talk, I'm sorry, because this represents all the Hawaiian petrels that were raised during the translocation, which was, as Andre said, 110. I want to talk a little bit about this because the curve of this graph is really important because it represents a strategy that most of the tube-nosed seabirds use to raise their young. And when I say tube-nosed, I mean, albatross, petrels, shearwaters. So what they do is they feed a bunch on the front side of the growth curve. And this is where most of the growth is going. They hatch as a little tiny chick, and then they grow up to basically. Now, the parents feed them sometimes as much as 30% or more above adult weight. So often people get really scared when they see this graph and they see this, oh my goodness, Robby's not feeding the birds. Well, so what happens here is that the parents feed like crazy. They get up here and the chicks are essentially, well, like I said, they're 40% above adult weight. And then the parents start tailoring off feeding and quit coming less and less and less until they don't come at all. And then the chicks fledge themselves. Now, I bring this up because this is important. This is part of what makes seabird translocations really effective, is that unlike some of the other birds I've worked with, the chicks have to figure it out on their own. One night, they just fly out to sea, they find their food, they find where they go, they find everything based on instinct. So if we do a good job of raising the birds, keeping them wild, keeping those natural instincts intact, they fly off to sea, and then it's just kind of nature takes its course. It's just a natural part of the process. Now, on the front side of this growth curve, this is what's impressive. To keep these chicks on a normal growth curve, we had to feed 15% of their body weight every single day. Now, if I don't see anybody eyebrows raised, I want you to do a little bit of math, because all you have to do is take your body weight times it 0.15. Now, I'm going to give away my weight, but that means I would have to eat 30 pounds of hamburgers every single day. And I can't do that. So, but that gives you a perspective of how much they're growing. And then the other thing is that in order to give them, so if you were to think about it, they have different nutritional requirements on the front side of the growth curve versus the back side of the growth curve. So not only are they fed a percentage of their body weight. Now, if you think about it, that makes sense, because just like all of us in the room aren't the same size, seabird chicks are different sizes too, which is something a lot of people don't realize. So if you feed based on a body weight percentage, you avoid overfeeding some and underfeeding some. Now, on the front side of the growth curve, you want to make sure that you're feeding, high protein, high caloric. And then on the back side of the growth curve, this is all way more information you want to know, but this is what's exciting. You would decrease feedings and increase fluids, so they're having a less caloric intake. So I welcome any questions about that later. But so this is a wing cord growth. Some of the other species that I've worked with, we translocate quite young, but like with all the hard work that Andre and his crew did, we were able to time this a little bit better, pre-emergence. So this growth curve right here is a wing cord growth curve. Now, we would measure their wings every third day And you say, why would you do it every third day? Well, it turns out seabirds hate their wings to be touched. They absolutely cannot stand it. So unless there was nothing to be concerned about, we could do it every third day just to avoid that kind of stress on a daily basis. But this represents pretty much the primary wing growth. As you can see, it's very, and on this side, so this would be during the time when the chicks were the heaviest there. They really start to grow these their primary wing feathers, their primary feathers. And they can grow 10 to 14 millimeters a day. It's really impressive. And then you see where they're leveling off. Once again, don't be scared. So this would represent, if you saw the graph I just showed you, now they're on the downward weight, getting closer to the adult fledged weight, and their wing cords have reached as long as they're going to grow, essentially, and they're starting to level off. And this is the time that they're losing that weight, thinking, am I really supposed to be somewhere else other than in my burrow? And with a little experience, you combine that information with the weight, the wing cord, and the wind, and Andre mentioned the moon, you have a pretty good idea when a lot of chicks are going to fledge. It turns out PRC was decent surrogate parents. We of 106 of 110 chicks, 106 fledged with a 96% fledge rate. Yeah. Obviously, that's the part that I'm the most proud of. So in 2020, we hit the first milestone. The first translocated Hawaiian petrel returned to Nihokū as an adult. So this is a bird that fledged, this guy was 4 years old when it returned, spent 4 years at sea. And then we had a total of 5 birds returned in 2020, combination 3 to 5 years old. And it was a nice mix of males and females that first year. Okay, so this right here is just kind of where we're at right now. So far, a total of 10 translocated Hawaiian petrels have returned to the site. The one returned this year at 6 years old. Kind of the biggest thing to take away from this is what's really encouraging for me is that the birds that are still returning are still from the earlier years. So that means that this bird came back at year 6. We still have a lot of birds to return, and a lot of them will. Okay, so and then 2022, this was a huge milestone. The first wild Hawaiian chick fledged from Nihokū. And what I mean is that 2 translocated birds returned, paired up, made a young of their own. We call it wild now. I didn't help with this one. And it flew out to sea and fledged on its own. This, to be clear, this was not the first nesting attempt, but this was the first successful nesting attempt. This pair had tried the year before. But turns out, like a lot of people, there's a learning curve, and they got to figure it out. Young birds, it's a lot of work to raise a chick if you're a seabird. You've got a 60-day incubation period, and you've got 143 days care for that chick. So it's a lot to get figured out. And then keep in mind, these guys aren't going just offshore. A lot of these birds are going a long ways, like the albatross, to find their food. In 2023, that we had a second one. Now, all I want to point out about this is clearly their adults had good parents because they figured out to feed stuff. That chick is very fat. And he's doing quite well. He fledged. Okay, so this is just a graph showing where we're at now. I want to point out that Hawaiian petrels are a long-lived seabird with a long sexual maturation process. And then also, like I said, oftentimes the parents that nest when they're young often fail their first few attempts. So this is a slow upward curve, but it's an upward curve all the same. So we're encouraged. With that, I want to thank everybody involved. This was a multi-agency, multi-volunteer, multi-people project. Some of those people are in this room. Thank you, everybody. If you wanted to learn more about the Hawaiian petrel translocation in general, there's a paper that's just focused on translocation. There's a QR code. You young people know how that works, but it's there. I'll swim back to that. And thank you. And then if anybody has any questions.
That wing cord like graph that you put up, I was thinking you probably use that term when you open the burrow, when you start to allow the birds to come out and start to fledge. Or a
It's a combination of days and wing cord. I often wait a little bit longer because we want to make sure that the birds that have been translocated are locked into the new site. So oftentimes I will wait a little extra time when I know that their wing cords will grown, a little bit more grown before I blocked it. But yes, that's a good clue. That's a good point when to unlock the burrow. So I usually kind of have a weight and a wing cord ratio that I'm looking for before I unlock the burrow.
And then from the time that you unlock it, they start coming out, how long is that period before they actually leave?
You know, it depends, but it can be a couple of weeks sometimes. Oftentimes with the younger, you know, I mentioned that we had one in care for 60 days. That's a bird that I feel pretty comfortable is locked into the new site. So I would feel more comfortable unblocking that burrow at a younger age to allow for longer practice time than an older bird. But it's usually about 2 to 3 weeks before they fledge that I'll unblock them. Mhm.
I don't know if you're aware, but that wing cord graph was actually wing shaped.
No, yeah, well, actually, yeah, it does look a little bit like wing shape, but what I'm measuring is just the longest point of the wing, but it does look kind of like a wing. That's a good point.
So the parents of the birds that you translocate, they're gonna keep coming back every year, right, to the
Yep.
mountains. So you've got a lifetime job. They're gonna
Well,
come and lay
you know,
egg
we
and-
picked an X number that we decided would establish a new colony and translocated that one. But the parents that we took the chick from are locked into that burrow and they come back and, you know, they come back and unfortunately, André has kidnapped their chick. But they do come back. But, you know, the nest failing and that kind of stuff in the mountains is a really sad, you know, André talked about some of the risks and the, you know, that are in the mountains. It happens a lot. You know, thankfully for this project, we were able to raise the chicks, you know, successfully. A lot of times they're not, but the parents will continue to come back and use that burrow and raise chicks. Yes. Sorry.
Without your help.
Yeah, without my help. Yeah, no, they can do it just fine without me. Well, you know, ideally, you know, exactly. You know, as many protected sites as we can have in the mountains or low elevation. Yes. You know, the best, I mean, you know, we did this translocation site, but, and it's working and it's important, but, you know, protecting them where the birds are at is obviously the most important thing. And, you know, and like I said, historically, they used to be at low elevation. So it's important to reestablish those colonies and that diversity. But yes, protecting them where they're at is still the most important thing for any of the birds. Yeah. Somebody had a question. Go ahead.
So after the chicks have been translocated, what would the parents' normal feeding schedule be if they're traveling so far? So they're not getting fed every day, and then versus what your schedule is. What was
Yeah,
your
you know, and
schedule?
that's a really good question, and that's there's multiple answers to that. I'm glad you asked. So, as you know, seabirds feed very feast or famine. You know, the parents can show up. They've spent multiple days at sea, you know, collecting and gathering a bunch of food, and we'll use the word regurgitate, and they come back and give the chicks huge meals. And, you know, sometimes, you know, like when I cared for albatross, they can almost double the weight of the albatross chick, and I'm not exaggerating. So we don't take that approach from now. First, I'll say that is the strategy that seabirds have evolved with because it works. It accommodates the elasticity, the growth. You know, they have the elastic growth to accommodate the feast or famine, but it's not the best way to grow. Because we do this when we monitor wild chicks, you'll see this. When they haven't gotten fed for a while, the wing cord growth slows down. Some of their body, you know, like in other things, they slow down. They kind of, oh, I'm having been fed, I don't want to fed next. So the reason to feed regularly is that's the best way to grow. So, and then from an avicultural standpoint, is our biggest risk for caring for a bird every day is if something doesn't get clean and sterile. So, I mean, and that's, if you look at projects, agriculture projects across the board, that's one of the main things because it takes a lot of detail and a lot of just concentration to keep things clean and, you know, no breaks. So aviculture approach is to feed a smaller amount every day. So that stabilizes growth. And secondly, it means you don't drop a lethal dose of food. So the fish story that I make is made up of two species of fish, squid, Pedialyte and salmon oil. That is a perfect medium for bacteria. So if you feed a smaller amount, if by chance, which has never happened, you give them some bad food or you didn't clean something, it's a small enough feed that they can pass it before it becomes a lethal dose. Maybe if you're unlucky, you have to give them a little antibiotic, but they pass it before it becomes. And now if I drop some huge body weight percentage in what they're fully capable of taking and it's bad food, then I don't have that advantage of being able to basically essentially flush them out. That's a really long answer. I'm sorry, but I hope that answered it. It's kind of a double approach. Yeah.
So I have a question, and it's about those birds in the enclosure at Nihokū and the expanding wedge-tail shearwater population. And I'm wondering if there's any issues with competition. Just wedgies seem to be a little more aggressive, and I'm just curious if that's showing up at all, interactions
We
between.
really haven't had a lot. It's a good question, and it's a very complicated, long answer, which I don't really know that I know the answer. But wedgies are more aggressive, and they seem to be doing a better job in the face of introduced predators is part of it. But thankfully, Hawaiian petrels pretty nasty themselves, and we love them for it. I think out of all the species I've done, they're the most difficult to raise. I say when I train my staff, they're the bird that keeps you honest, because if you linger or don't do anything correctly, they're going to let you know in usually unpleasant ways. So that is a problem that we may face, because wedgies are doing quite well. But so far at Nihokū, they're spread out enough that we haven't had any kind of direct interactions. But it's a good question, and time will tell. Somehow, historically they would have competed, but right now, for some reason, wedgies are doing a little bit better at, I think, what my theory is, just dealing with the way we've changed the environment.
I remember, Robby, that also one of your biggest fears was after all that work and the birds were coming out and getting ready to fledge, that barn owls would get them. Is the refuge currently doing a good job? Or are you guys working together to control barn owls in the area?
Yeah, then that's still a big fear. Luckily, PRC has a bigger presence. Thank you, Dylan and Lauren, who are out there, who, along with some of the other predator management they do, are keeping an eye out for the barn owls. It's something I feel really strongly about. What current program is in place, I got to be honest with you, I've been in Mexico working on some of our other projects, so I'm not real up to speed with what, how often they hunt and things like that. But we also have done translocations at James Campbell at National Wildlife Refuge, and barn owls are a problem there. And we have a regular control program. Unfortunately, the beautiful animals, it's like a lot of things, they don't belong on the landscape in Hawaii.
So I don't know if this is a question for Andre or Robby. Have the nesting boxes at Mokuai been successful?
I wouldn't know.
I have seen those for a while now, but my understanding is that some of them will wash away.
I saw some of them have fallen down on the, yeah.
And wedgies that take over. But that's like, I don't know what the stats.
Okay, thanks.
You had a question.
Have there been any attempts to
returning
excavate burrows by
birds?
returning birds?
So far, all the returning birds, to my knowledge, have picked the artificial burrows. And in fact, excitingly, oftentimes within just a few burrows from where they fled from, because we know that natal instinct is strong. Yeah, and I'm waiting for it to happen, because some of the other birds, like at James Campbell, we have 130 artificial burrows in that fence, and most of the birds are making their own burrow, which it makes it really hard to monitor, but it's really interesting because they prefer to make their own burrow. And I actually, maybe I'm just lazy, but I was just like, man, I come back and there's a burrow ready, I'm moving in. But no, they all want to make their own. A good percentage want to make their own burrow. But so far, all the return ones here, to answer your question, I've used the artificial burrows.
Clarify about the projects of expanding. I thought you were saying that the birds are fed a certain amount of days, but actually they're, before they fledge is a longer period.
Mhm.
And so clarify what happens in between or how that works. And then a follow-on question would be, it sounded also like you're restricting their movement out of the artificial burrow, locking them in basically. And how does that work?
Okay, so I'm not sure I understood the first part of your question. You're saying how do I accommodate the downward trend
No.
or
The duration of the feeding period
Mhm.
seemed to be longer than what you were feeding.
Yeah. Mhm.
So why is that? I mean, because you got them right after they were, hatched, and they're going to fledge at a certain time. Why aren't you feeding them the entire time necessary? Or my misunderstanding.
Why isn't feeding them? Well, it kind of goes back to me answering her question earlier, is that I spread out the feeding, and I don't ever stop feeding them. To be clear, when they're on that downward slope, oftentimes that's a period where the parents aren't coming to feed them anymore at all. I'll check in because these are very special birds, and I have the advantage of basing that big graph knowing what a bird should weigh. And then just because, like I said before, just because that's what the parents do and they're dealing with their natural history cycle, which is I don't have to go very far to get my food. So I'll oftentimes give them a little bit of food during that time because my main concern is hydration, not on that downward slope, not protein. It's actually hydration because it's always a good thing to be well hydrated. And in fact, it always makes me really sad when I go to the wild colonies when the parents have cut those, when they cut the birds off, because I can always see right away, like, just, based on the telltale signs that bird is actually dehydrated. So he may fledge, he might not have the best chance to survive. And my job is to give our chick the best chance to survive. Fattest, happiest, longest winged birds that we can play. And on average, most of the species we do, I'm going to say all the species that we do, when the chicks fledge, they're fledging with longer wings than their wild peers. They're fledging heavier than their wild peers, and they're actually fledging sooner than their wild peers. The reason for blocking in is just a safe precaution. It's a lot of stress to be moved. I don't pretend for a minute that there's not a lot of stress involved with translocations. My job, all the projects I've worked on, is to minimize that stress, but I'm always really honest and really real that that's a hard time to go through. So I sometimes worry that a bird coming down and being taken to a complete novel environment may try to be confused, look for somewhere else, try to leave the burrow, get lost in the bushes, do something that's not safe. So there is a little bit of time where I do lock them in the burrow just to make sure that they settle down, and they do. Once they settle down and we unblock them, that's their home. They come and go. And like I was talking to him, sometimes we have some that come out and practice for 2 to 3 weeks. That's their home now. And that's the idea, is just to lock them in, to get comfortable, make it smell like them, poop on the walls, do whatever they do to make like this is home now. I hope I answered your question. Oh.
Another question. Last year we had such a terrible year with avian pox with the compost.
Mhm.
Is that also?
That is, I have not had any problem with pox with the burrow nesters. I'm waiting for it and I'm expecting it. We do struggle with avian pox with our albatross translocations. We've always been able to get our birds through it with a little just kind of medical care. I have a whole protocol set up for once the pox or the lesions start to appear. But interestingly enough, I have never had any of our burrow nesters get pox. Other thing I wanted to point out is that we did multiple years, and that's also a strategy for translocations. Because if you think about it, some years are different on the ocean. There's more resources. We all know about this, La Nina, El Nino. So essentially you want to spread out your cohort across multiple years, because no matter how good we do our job, survivability for either translocated birds or wild birds is going to be different year to year. So you don't want to, essentially the old cliche, put all your eggs in one basket. And you wanted to ask about pox.
Yeah, I was just saying, all these years we haven't seen pox in any Kauai birds, but Lanai last year, I think it was last year or the year before, they had multiple chicks with terrible pox, where you could see them on the camera. They had a couple birds die from it. It was like lesions all down their throat. So something I'd never seen before. Wasn't really expecting to see it, but these were Oahu. Yeah. So while we haven't seen it here, it can definitely impact these birds in whatever the wrong scenario is for them. And it was wet down there too that year. So
I want to know exactly why it was so bad. The rainfall wasn't hugely different than other years. They weren't different species of mosquitoes. Do you have any theories about why it was so bad?
It was definitely less wind.
And more mosquito
concentration.
And that's my theory too. When we see our outbreaks with the albatross, it's usually related to less the rain and low wind years. Yep, that's been my experience. Yeah.
And Lanai, the colonies, the colonies lower elevation, so more mosquitoes, but unfortunately, as we know with our forest birds, mosquitoes are getting higher and higher up in the mountains, so it could be something to look out for future here.
Any other questions? That was fun. Thank you.
So I'm here because of these guys and their incredible work. I just wanted to say I learned so much. Thank you. When I became interested, I'm going to circle back. I just don't want to forget to say, poor Andre, I applied him. Do you remember? We hadn't met, but I kept on emailing him with questions, and he would send me papers and more papers and more papers. And I learned so much. And then with Robby, I got to spend a lot of time with him in the field for this project. And that was what made me want to undertake this book. So I've done a lot of art for different conservation organizations. It's been a lot of fun. Oh, sure. It's been great working for different conservation organizations, and it's always a great excuse to get out into the field, which is my favorite place to be. I did lots of books previously that were working with Hawaiian legends. I was interested in how humans interact with nature. And then I just went right to the source. And then albatross flew into my life. So once I was exposed to albatross, I was like, that was it for me. And then I started bugging everybody, how can I get to be with albatross? And I was told by Beth Flint that I needed to get out to Midway. So then I started to work on how to get out to Midway. And first time I went, oh, that's what a colony sounds like. So the first time I went, it was 2014, hatch year 2015. And I was out there to create art for Midway, fundraising art, and also to participate in the albatross census. And it's an amazing experience that I wish everybody could have, and that is to go to a place where there's just an abundance of wildlife. I mean, this many birds. We counted over 500,000 nests, active nests. So that means there's a pair of adults for each nest. So, and that's just the albatross. And there's all kinds of seabirds out there, and it's just a marvelous place to be. Really, really special. I have my buddy here, my cohort now. Louise and I we lead the count every other year now. We're going to be heading out there for this season for a couple months. So I created a book, I worked with Cornell Lab and created a book about albatross. After this experience, I wanted to find some way to share it with kids and adults, you know, and how can you reach a lot of people? And I thought, well, books, maybe that would be a good way. So I worked with Cornell Lab, and we created this book, A Perfect Day for an Albatross. And it's basically from the albatross's perspective, as though, but you know, you kind of imagine what it might be like to be an albatross. And it's kind of a fun way to teach the biology of this bird when it's this bird's experience. And then I created a book, an exhibit that travels around now. It's actually available if anybody knows a school or a library that would be interested in this. It's basically the book that's spread out on panels, and it teaches about albatross, but it was with Seymour Marine Discovery Center in Santa Cruz. We created this exhibit that's being moved around now. So after this, I got on the idea that we needed to be more aware, kids needed to be more aware of extinction. but I wanted to tell the story of extinction in a way that empowered people, not just all the depressing aspects that it is depressing, but to give people tools for being able to conserve what we still have. So I wrote a book about a boy named after the extinct bird. And I spent a lot of time in Fish Museum looking at the skins, which was, oh my gosh, it's just like drawers full of skins of dead birds. But the other challenge was bringing this dead bird to life, because in the story, in the book, this young boy has a relationship in his dreams with the extinct bird. And through the book, he wants to figure out why he was named after this bird. And it's a good story, because at the end, he's ready to make a difference. And I do bring in the cultural aspect always, and ways that we can help. Then, kind of through this time, I started to spend time with Robby. Friend of mine, Megan Dalton, kept inviting me to James Campbell and here to Nihokū. So I got to experience many years, and I did a lot of cleaning. That was Robby's thing, like clean, clean, clean. And I said, okay. So it was great. I mean, I learned so much. And I love this picture that Brett Nainoa Mossman took. You don't see that many of the Ua'u close up over the ocean. I thought that was really lovely. This is actually, I never handled the Hawaiian petrel, because I am not worthy. No. It's an endangered species. However, I did get to handle the bone-in petrel. And I'm very proud of that, how I'm torturing the bird in that picture. This is a Ua'u. Can you make it lower? Is there a way to? Or can I pause it? Pause. Okay, great. That's Rachel Sprague on Lanai. There's a wonderful colony. They're very robust, and I got to spend some time in there. And so I want to just back up and say what I learned early on is so there are remnant colonies on a lot of different, on four different islands, 4 of the islands, and they're in very different habitats. And that made me very interested. I wanted to go and visit all of the colonies if I could. And I've gotten pretty good at bugging people enough where they're just like, I'll just invite her. So I got to go, and I spent time with Rachel, and it was very cool because you don't have to go too far to actually get into the colony there. And I also want to say in the story, so I had all these experiences, and at the end I thought, well, how can I tell this in a way that would be interesting to people in a cohesive way? So I decided, well, how about through a young girl? So all of my experience visiting people on the different islands and the different colonies, it's told through Makani, this girl. She's named after the wind that seabirds depend on, Makani. So in the story, her mom is a biologist, and she works with Pacific Rim Conservation. It's kind of like roughly based on different people, a synthesis of different people that I met that are doing incredible work with these birds. So through her mom's work, Makani learns about the biology. So it's all woven into the story. She's a very young girl. At the beginning, she's just a little girl going up into the colony and hearing these birds. And she says, oh, can we bring one home? I want to raise it. I want to feed it. And her mom's like, these are wild birds. And she starts to understand from a very young age that you can love a wild bird and not have it know you, just you knowing and you respecting its wildness. That was another really important thing to me to get that idea across, because it's not natural. I mean, with seabirds, Robby taught me that they don't ever kind of think they're people or try to be people. They just want to bite you and draw blood. So it's not so much of a fear of with other species, you have to like not ever let them see you. But anyway, that idea of letting them be wild and loving them for it, and just wanting to help them if you can. That was an important message to me. So I spent time out with Robby and his friends in the colony. This is the artificial burrows. And this actually took place on Lanai, where they nest a lot of times underneath the uluhe ferns. And it's very moist there, but it kind of fit in this spot, so I put it there. And there's André. And yeah, so that's that part of the story. They're out in the mountains collecting these birds, just like that. It was that easy. And then bringing them by helicopter down. And I got to be on the receiving end. So I got to experience actually when the helicopter comes down and then the birds come in, and there were two in it. In from Robby's slide, you saw there were two birds in each of the boxes. They come in and they immediately weighed them and measured them. And then they were, oh my gosh, look at that cutie. But then they're immediately put in these beautiful burrow boxes and start their new life. So I should say there's all these different characters in the book, but Robby is called Bobby. And he didn't know that until today. I told him. So Makani really loves Bobby. Because he's a really cool guy and a little bit, you know, like ornery and sarcastic sometimes. But he was just like the perfect character for an 11-year-old girl to just look up to and learn from, respect. Like, you know, you'll see if you read the book, it's kind of sweet the way she learns so much from him, and he delivers things the way you delivered to me. Maybe not exactly, I wasn't an 11-year-old girl, but it was, I loved learning from you. So safe inside the predator exclusion fence, Makani would hear the playback speaker. So she would hear that sound of the uwa'u, and it would call out to the wild birds, come, this is a good place to nest. So that's my friend Megan and Robby, and this is when they're feeding a almana'o, a Newell's shearwater. And they dive 150 feet underwater for food and chase it. I mean, that's so cool. So then with Rachel Sprague on Lanai, and these are some of her photos of their petrels on Lanai. So they were just starting to put in that fence, which I guess is finished now. Yeah, so cool. At the time when I was there, it was still one of those ungulate fences. But here's Rachel. They put one of those reflector lines. They had experimented with different things, something so that the birds wouldn't crash into the fence. But it was the experience, like at the very beginning of the book, that's Makani's experience. And that was my experience. Like we climbed up along the fence line and then we laid down on the uluhe, the springy uluhe. And I could feel these birds underneath, the hum. There were so many of them, just the hum of their little chattering to each other underneath. And then above, we couldn't see, but then she gave me the night vision, the goggles, and all of a sudden the sky just came to life and they're just chasing each other and they're making that sound and they're going by so close to our faces. It was just, chicken skin. So that's how the story begins. I mean, this is this little girl's experience. So she's so lucky to have grown up with these birds. They would just go up into the colony all the time. And she gets to spend time with her mom, Makani does. So Rachel, at the time, there was one bird, one uwa'u, a chick that one of the parents died. So there was only one parent. Well, you need two parents to provision a chick. So this chick wasn't going to make it. So they would go out and they would feed the chick on off days when the parent hadn't been there. So Makani gets to go into the field and she's keeping her journal and writing and learning all about it. Then I went to Maui and I hung out with Jay Penniman, and I mean, a totally different habitat for these birds. That's little me and with all these big rocks. And Jay was great. And yeah, that's another thing that you use to attract the wild birds is you'll have an Oahu decoy. So here we are at 10,000 feet, over 10,000 feet at Haleakala. And there's a cat that the game camera catches. So they show up every. So they're a real problem. And what, I can't remember who told me, but a male can travel 5 miles in a day and eat chicks and adults. Another thing that's interesting is their eggs are pretty big to their body size. So I did see an egg. I wish I had my hand in it so that you could get the size of it. And also on Maui, it's a slightly different breeding schedule. So that's another thing that's interesting. So maybe it's, well, the fact that they go back to the same nest. So they aren't, I mean, who are they out meeting other albatross, other uwa'u out over the ocean? I mean, they're probably meeting, they're courting probably over their colony. Anyway, it's interesting. There's a lot that's still to be learned. So I spent a lot of time in the last 4 years on Hawaii Island doing the surveys in the colonies up there. And they have, I think, 3 different areas that they're remnant colonies, but now they have a cat fence in this one area that we spent, I think, 3 of the seasons. And we would helicopter up there and camp up there and then just walk around and visit all the old nests and then try to find new ones by looking for different clues. Yeah, we found one. We assumed it was a nest because outside of it, there were some down, a little bit of chick down. And then there was also the white wash, the poop on the ground. And sometimes if there's a little bit of sandy area, you can actually see their footprints in the sand. So that was exciting. So I have Makani and her friend, and they're looking for new nests. This was like the most fun. I got to go up when we brought up a detection dog. This is Michelle Reynolds and her dog Slater. And what an amazing experience, just watching how she trained the dog and how this knows, I mean, what he could find. And he did. He actually, we were there, Michelle had been hoping to find an ake and rump storm petrel nest forever. And Slater found it. And we know for sure that it was an active nest because the chick was right there, like right next to the entrance. You could actually see it by just looking in. Poor Charlotte, she looked and she fell backwards. She got so freaked out. So she put a camera, a couple of cameras on there and kept track of it until it fledged. But they don't leave any clues. They're just very secretive. There's Slater after a long day. I also was really intrigued by the idea of using cartoons, like to show the motion of the way she would direct the dog and how he would go around. And also it's about wind. The wind has to be moving at such an angle where the scent comes to him. So we'd have to position ourselves. And this is over like pretty tricky terrain, a lot of So that was crazy. He has, well, we experimented a lot. They're actually inner tubes from like motorbikes. They had to be the right size, and we constructed them because there wasn't, I guess there are some, but they didn't hold up in that terrain. It just was too rough for the doggies. So yeah, they can't, their paws just get destroyed up there. So he had to wear these little rubber protection booties. So here was a little competition going on. Yep, Charlotte had to prove herself to Slater. It didn't work very well. So so they had me tie a little, a bit of a tape on my arm. So it's like a way of seeing which way the wind goes, a telltale. Have you ever heard of a telltale? Yeah, I hadn't. So it was such a cute, I was thinking like a tale and also telling a story. So I was like, ooh, I love this. So you put you don't think there's any wind at all. And then you tie this around your wrist, put your arm up in the air, and it's like, it moves. So you can tell where the wind is coming from. And that way we could position ourselves for the doggy. So I spent a lot of time after going over all the game camera cards, reviewing the whole season. And that was really fun. I started to feel like a voyeur, like, God, but it's so exciting. It's like they're coming out, ooh. So yeah, a lot of coming out and sniffing around and like moving the dirt closer to the, to the nest. They're really cute, the chicks at this time, and doing a lot of the wing exercising. So then I was interested in Linda Elliott's work up at Hawaii Wildlife Center, because they do, for all of the islands, they will rehabilitate birds. So at the time that I was doing the research, there was an Oahu that was in their care that had a broken wing. So they fixed the wing. The bird was doing great, was in the exercise pool and broke a primary feather. So they were able to repair the feather, and then the bird fledged. So sweet. All these really cool things happened, like during the time period when I was doing the research on this, for this book. So all of it became part of the story. And I also want to say things were delayed because they kept wanting more art from me. It's a long book. It's 120 pages. And there's also, it's chapters and there's back matter. About a third of the book is actually factual stuff. That there's a glossary, there's Hawaiian cultural connections, and lots of biology. And so it kept on getting, the end kept on getting prolonged. And it was kind of great because I was hoping that there would be a return. And it happened. The bird, the Oahu came back, and then even before I had to hand in the final version of the story, the first chick from the wild couple had fledged. So yeah, this is one of my challenges. How do you tell a story about understanding and appreciating a bird or an animal that's wild, not wanting it to be a pet? So things I was able to talk about were how they find food and what their food is, and the Hawaiian cultural connections, and their threats, and more threats, lots of threats. But I love this. When I came here and I saw these aid stations, I thought it was just so cool. So yeah, I don't think we have anything like this on the Big Island. I haven't seen it. So if you read this story, you'll discover at the end what Makani finds out, how she finds a way to make a difference. And there are lots of things that we can all do to help these birds. So my work is hand-colored block prints. And I actually have a sample of I use recycled rubber blocks for my block printing. So I did bring one to show you guys. But this is what it looks like. These are my tools, and I start with a drawing, transfer it to the block, pull a black print, and then I hand color with colored pencils. Thank you. And that's it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, you guys. And thank you, Kīlauea Point. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Oh, questions? Yes.
So how long in total did it take you to create that book? I know there's a lot of block prints that you had to carve and color.
Yeah.
So how long total do you think?
Well, the research part was before that. That was a multi-year. But the actual, when I started in earnest, it was probably a couple of years, I'd say. So there's a lot of block prints and there's a lot of drawings. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. They're pencils. Yeah. So colored pencils. They're actually watercolor pencils. So they could be blended a little bit. Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you again. As I mentioned, we have books in the back for folks to pick up and get signed and talk story and enjoy looking at the materials here. So thank you, gentlemen, for all that you've done for our wildlife and all that you shared tonight. It was an absolute pleasure. Mahalo nui. And thank you for being here. Have a great evening. Good night. Aloha. Do you have any questions? Okay.